Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We're powered by CLNS Radio, where you can get the best coverage of the NBA this time of year. NBA playoff stuff is going off full steam. I know Danny LaRue just released a really good podcast with Ben Golliver. I'm going to be on the Lakers Nation podcast coming up at some point this week with Trevor Lane. I know that Sixers Beat is going crazy with the NBA draft, so keep it locked there. Today on the Game Theory Podcast, we've got Cole Zwicker from over at the Step Back, a variety of places. One of the smarter writers that I get a chance to converse with on a regular basis. And the reason I've brought him on is we're going to kind of go through a twofold thing here. We're not just going to talk about one topic. And Cole can kind of navigate this a little bit better than most people can. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the Cavs-Raptors series. Basically, Cleveland, how dominant they are, the Raptors, where they go from here, and then finally we're going to close on some NBA draft prospects that we think are being a little bit undervalued, guys that right now are projected to go undrafted, something like that, but may end up being selected or may end up in the NBA next year. So how's it going, Cole? How is the weekend treating you?
It's going well, man. I'm actually a guy that can watch NBA regardless of inevitability, so it doesn't matter if we're going to get Warriors Cavs. I'm amped for all of it, so I pretty much watch every game, and it's been good.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. Everyone's asking me, like, do you think this is going to be Warriors Cavs? Does that bother you? And I'm just like, no, I want to see Warriors Cavs 3. Like, this sounds awesome to me. Like, does the inevitability bother you? And I'm just like, no, I want to see it, and I don't care if the Cavs and Warriors both rip through the playoffs at 12-0 and end up on like track to meet each other. I think that would be kind of, I don't know, like, do you think that would be good for the NBA if both those teams just ripped off at 12-0?
It'd be interesting. I don't know. I can't really gauge the general fanship. I'm sure it'd be good for ratings. I'm all about execution when it comes to the NBA, though. I watch it because it's high-level play. If you want entertainment value, watch the NCAA tournament, which has its own merits as well. But for me, I want to see the best players play against the best players. I think that's what really brings about the best in the sport.
Yeah, I totally agree there. And that's kind of a great way to transition into Cleveland here. What have you seen from Cleveland so far? There was a lot of consternation and concern about the Cavs coming into the playoffs. Is this the year that that LeBron finally gets toppled in the Eastern Conference? Is this the year that Boston makes its push, that Toronto can finally get in, that Washington, this team that's been hot throughout the second half of the season, can kind of finally get to where they need to be? What have your impressions been, though, of Cleveland just dominating everyone we've seen so far?
Well, I think the rubric of LeBron plus shooting equals unstoppable still. I mean, That's what we're seeing is the fact that Cleveland's shooting the living hell out of the ball off spot-ups. You play LeBron with spacing, and he's finding these guys. They're impossible to guard, really. I mean, you can't defend all of their shooters at once, especially when they play that Love-Fry 4-5 matchup in the front court. It's just impossible to guard them to Korver, Kyrie Irving off the ball, J.R. Smith. I mean, they just designed their team to where maybe they're not the best two-way team. I still think they're going to have some defensive issues, especially against the Warriors. But if you're talking just overall offensive scheme, I mean, I don't see another team in the East having the talent level to topple LeBron. And if they're just going to shoot threes at this level, I can't remember who tweeted something ridiculous about their spot-up shooting in the playoffs this year. But if they're going to shoot at this level, there's no team in the East that has the talent to beat them.
Well, here's this number from Blake Murphy over at Raptors Republic, who we've had on the show before. Blake said that there was a 34 three-pointers made difference in this series against the Warriors. That is a 102-point difference from just three-pointers in 4 games played. That is an insane number. And if they're going to shoot at that level, I don't think anyone can beat them, obviously. Like LeBron plus Kyrie's ability to break down defense, as we saw against Corey Joseph time and again late in the fourth quarter in this game. Kevin Love can stretch the floor. Like you mentioned, Channing Frye can stretch the floor. They have a second option at center if they need to go away from that, with Tristan Thompson and his ability to defend, his ability to grab offensive rebounds on the offensive end. It's a really just unstoppable mix of talent. And it goes back to something I've been mentioning basically every time that I can bring this up. The fact that the Cavaliers and Dan Gilbert have not just opened up the checkbook to David Griffin and just given him whatever he wants to stay, literally $10 million. It's a much better expense than what the Knicks are paying Phil Jackson, because David Griffin actually knows what he's doing. He's like one of 3 or 4 or 5 general managers in the NBA where I look at him and I know for a fact that he is a genius and know for a fact that he is elite at his job. It is crazy to me that the guy who, basically got J.R. Smith and Amon Shumpert for Dion Waiters, who got, Darren Williams to come to the team and shore up the point guard position and didn't, just throw out unnecessary assets, who got Channing Frye for like an extra first round pick, essentially, who got, Derek Williams for free, basically, who got Kyle Korver with like a little bit of finagling with first round picks with Portland. The guy knows exactly what he's doing. He saved Dan Gilbert money over the course of the years too, if you look at it, with the way that he's operated with Chris Anderson, with some of the other guys that were kind of floating at the end of their bench. It's crazy to me that this guy, might end up in Orlando next offseason because the Cavs aren't willing to open the checkbook.
It's really a quietly well-designed roster. Tristan Thompson is a really nice piece for them that people overlook a lot, but we see the value of defending in space for bigs. Mm-hmm. Even a really awesome big like Gobert. You saw what the Warriors did to him yesterday, putting him in 3-5 pick and roll with Durant, and he's just not going to be able to defend him there. Yep. Like Thompson might not either because Durant is unbelievable, probably one of the best scorers of all time, but at least Thompson can maybe keep him in front and challenge. So you have such roster diversity there. They're able to identify, this is what the Warriors do really well. They identify talent that fits on their roster. You turn J.R. Smith into more of a 3-and-D guy where you cut out those ridiculous dribbles. You just make him a spot-up shooter. You make him fixate defensively, and you have something really valuable there. And Griffin's done a really good job managing the salary cap too. I mean, they really invested in the CBA, and you can tell with the Matthew Dellavedova-Simon trade taking in.
Yep.
Mike Dunleavy and all those mechanisms they've done. It's just been really impressive.
The Cavs use trade exceptions and use end of bench flotsam for salary matching better than any team in the NBA that I can think of.
I agree.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy what they have done in building this roster. And ultimately it all comes back to LeBron, right? Like we should mention LeBron just being unbelievable at this stage. Like if you look at his last 10 or 11 playoff games, it's just outrageous what he's been able to do for the Cavs. Like he's averaging 35 points per game and 10 assists and 10 rebounds over the course of those games. And they haven't lost over the course of the last 11 games in the playoffs, obviously, having come back from that 3-1 deficit against the Warriors. And LeBron seems to have taken his game somehow to a next step. I saw some crazy, number where he's shooting 1.4 points per possession on jump shots right now, which is, if he's doing that, he's literally unguardable. There are at least ideas that you can use to, marginally affect him if he's not shooting like that. But if he's shooting like that, you literally cannot stop him. You cannot do anything defensively to even possibly contain him.
Yeah, especially isolation, pick and roll, all that stuff. But what makes him even better than just that when he's being unstoppable is the fact that he's so versatile. He can serve as the roll man and stuff. Like when they have those Kyrie, LeBron pick and rolls, he can catch the ball in the short roll and he can just destroy teams. His passing, I was talking about this with somebody earlier on Twitter, it's one pass away for most teams, but LeBron, it's you're always one pass away defense because he can hit everybody on the floor anytime. He makes so many compromising passes to defenses that just with that shooting, it's just unguardable. So if you have that team that moves the ball, say an extra pass, and that's what the Cavs, when they're at their best, LeBron's hitting these really compromising passes. They make an extra pass. They get an open corner three. That's how they really thrive. If they can do that, they can beat anyone. Yeah,
it was funny. I was getting all kind of crap on Twitter, with people retweeting. I wrote, and we can kind of transition here to the Raptors after saying this. I wrote when the Raptors acquired PJ Tucker and Serge Ibaka, oh, well, clearly they're going all in. They're trying to build this roster to compete with Cleveland. They get Ibaka to play the small ball 5. They get PJ Tucker as your quote unquote LeBron stopper. And in so much as anyone can be a LeBron stopper, obviously no one can really do that. At least to the fullest extent. But PJ Tucker is kind of the perfect defender for LeBron James in the modern NBA. And with the way LeBron is playing right now, it just doesn't matter. LeBron is just so unstoppable at this stage that even someone who can really get up in his grill and bother him like PJ Tucker is just not doing anything.
No, the best you can really do is get a PJ Tucker type that at least has the body to, single cover him in the post or something like that. That's really all you can do. If he's going to do what he's doing, there's nobody on this planet can guard him. Even Andre Iguodala did a pretty good job on him in the finals. That's probably the best just because he's such a technician. But really, There's nobody on this planet can guard a 6'8" guy that's that athletic and that skilled. We just never seen anything like it before.
No, we haven't. And like, you're going to have like all these Jordan and LeBron comparisons, and I don't really care about that. But like, to me, LeBron is the most just physically gifted basketball player ever. I don't really care if that means best, if it means fifth best, whatever. But he is the most physically gifted athlete I think I've ever seen in my life. Even watching tape on old athletes, watching whatever you can throw out there. This guy is just so incredibly talented at every single aspect of his craft that it's just so beyond remarkable to me what he's been able to do.
And that kind of functional athleticism just gives him such advantages over some, like, people always say, like, is he really that elite of a passer? It's like, yes, absolutely he is. He is, because he's really smart. Maybe there's guys that can read the floor better. I'm not sure. There probably is historically. But nobody has the athleticism to increase and enhance your opportunities to pass. And that's just really what he has. He has that athleticism gap that other guys that are really smart don't have. And you combine that mental and physical talent, it's insane.
Yeah, it's like Magic Johnson, basically. Like, Magic Johnson was 6'7" or whatever, and had this athleticism as well as size that no one else in the 80s had. And We're seeing it again with LeBron. It's just unbelievable. Let's talk about their opponent, because I think that for all that we just talked about, the Cavaliers, they're not that interesting within the context of the Eastern Conference, because they're just going to win the Eastern Conference, I think. Like, I was someone who said that Boston should not have gone all in with Jimmy Butler and Paul George, just because I didn't think that it would make a difference against Cleveland this year. So, like, I think Cleveland is very clearly going to win the conference and get to the finals. The Raptors, on the other hand, this team has probably the most interesting offseason upcoming of any NBA team in the entire league. Would you agree?
It's definitely up there. They just have a lot of big-time decisions with big money guys that you can't really ignore.
So, yeah, let's kind of go there. So, Kyle Lowry is going to be an unrestricted free agent. Serge Ibaka is an unrestricted free agent. PJ Tucker is an unrestricted free agent. They have one more, right? Who's the other one?
Patrick Patterson.
Patrick Patterson is an unrestricted free agent. So they already have, I believe, $74 million in space without those four guys on their roster. Kyle Lowry, for me, has been a top 20 player in the NBA over the course of the last 3 years. Would you say that's about right?
I would say even a little bit higher than that. I'd say probably top 12. When he's healthy, he's really, really elite. I think he's probably the third best point guard behind Paul and Curry for me, depending on what you want to do with James Harden. So
yeah, in the regular season, I think that that's a totally fair argument. I guess I just kind of downgrade him from the lack of postseason success. Like, even in terms of individual performance, he just has not performed in the playoffs for whatever reason. And yes, I would agree with you. He's probably a top 12 player in the regular season. Downgrade him a little bit, top 20, something like that. Regardless, those guys typically get maximum contract offers. I think that that's fair to say, right?
Oh, absolutely, especially in this market. I forgot to add Westbrook, too, so nobody kill me for that. Obviously, he's up there. So
right. But, I don't think anyone's going to kill you for, forgetting just, like, random-ass point guards. So Kyle Lowry, his max contract this year, being an 11-year veteran who is now, I believe, 31 years old, his contract will start at $35 million next year. It'll be right around $205 million, given the $101 million salary cap projection that came out in around April. So this is all like subject to marginal changes, but that's right around where we're talking here. Those are the max numbers that we're talking for Kyle Lowry. It's right around 205 if he gets a full 5-year max from Toronto. If he goes elsewhere and has to get a 4-year contract, it's right around $152 million. And this is all assuming he doesn't make All-NBA, which I think is probably a pretty fair assumption, right?
Yeah, he's not going to make all of it. Yeah, I definitely agree with the games missed and stuff like that and how crowded the position is this year for sure.
Right. So the question for the Raptors is do you think it's worthwhile to expend $200 million guaranteed to a point guard that is 31, kind of entering the downside of his career, even though Kyle keeps himself in shape as well as anyone does, and, he's a physical bulldog. Like, he might age better than most other point guards, especially given the way that he's morphed into this just remarkable off-the-dribble shooter. But $205 million in this marketplace, with the way that their roster is currently constructed, that's kind of a tough sell to me. I think someone would give him $152 million over the course of 4 years. I don't know that Toronto should give him $200 million over 5. What do you think?
I mean, it depends on what the opportunity cost is. They're in a weird situation because they have established players on the roster right now. They have DeMar DeRozan, they have Jonas Valanciunas, they have DeMar Carroll. All those guys are high salary guys. So I feel like they have to choose one or the other. You can't be a middling team where you just kind of sit in the middle and you don't pick a side. You have to have a plan. So if they don't re-sign Kyle Lowry, I think that they should move DeRozan. They should look to rebuild. I just don't see a value in hanging on to DeRozan, hanging on to Valanciunas, and just kind of sitting in that middling place in the East, because they could still probably be like maybe the 9th or 8th seed with that roster without Kyle Lowry, depending on who they get in this place. But it's like we can ask this question for every team in the NBA that's not the Cavs and the Warriors. Like, what do you do over the next 3 or 4 years when the Warriors are at their peak, when the Cavs have LeBron who still just will not age like most people age? Like, what do you do? That's a question that I think every individual team has to answer, and it's going to be different. Some teams are going to prefer to rebuild. Some teams are going to prefer to make the playoffs. The Raptors can be a top 3 seed over the next 3 years or 4 years. What's the value in that?
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to the way you want to experience your roster over the course of the next few years, right? So, with LeBron James being in the East, with Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving being there on that roster, it's hard for me to see them being very realistic contenders over the next 3 seasons. But they're not going to be realistic contenders with or without Kyle Lowry, right? Like, do you think it's worthwhile? And this all comes down to the way that you want to build and you want to just have your organization be. Would you rather be successful? Because I think there is inherent value in being a successful organization over the course of a 8-year stretch or 6-year stretch or whatever this would be for Toronto. I think that there is inherent value in that. Or would you rather be a team that builds to the future, kind of tries to build for after the next 3 or 4 years, tries and, build their roster, trades DeRozan, and just builds toward the future instead of that? Which way do you kind of fall on that?
Probably towards the latter, but like I said, you have to commit to either one of them. If you re-sign Lowry, I would bring back Ibaka. I would try to make my team as good as possible, just in case there's an injury to the Cavs, and you kind of live that life where you're on the precipice. If something happens to LeBron, God forbid, something happens to one of the guys on the Warriors, you can take advantage of that opportunity. So there is inherent value in that. I get that. But if you aren't going to do that, if you're going to kind of half-ass it, I think you should commit to rebuilding. You trade DeRozan, you trade these guys, and you look to move on and capitalize in the next kind of interim, 4 or 5 year space to compete in the future. You have to position yourself. If this is what you're about as a franchise, because not all franchises work that way. If you want to win a championship, you have to kind of put all your cards in a row, when you have to, and you have to capitalize on certain markets. So I think for the Raptors, I would re-sign Lowry. I think another aspect of this is maybe he's tradable after that.
I know it's going to be my next question.
Yeah, because he's such an elite player. I mean, there's injury concerns, there's age concerns, but if we look at the market right now, how many guys are you going to get on the open market that are better than Kyle Lowry? Not many. So I think there will be trade value still there, and at least you can recoup something for him.
See, so this is what I kind of think about this whole situation. If I was the Raptors, what I would probably try to do, I would probably try to re-sign Kyle Lowry and trade DeMar DeRozan. But I would imagine that re-signing Kyle Lowry is probably going to be somewhat inherently dependent on them keeping DeMar DeRozan, and keeping him happy is them keeping DeMar DeRozan, given the fact that they're best friends. So do you keep, is it possible to keep Kyle Lowry happy if you trade his best friend and try and retool around guys like Serge Ibaka and, maybe try and trade Jonas Valanciunas and, rebuild around a Norman Powell, Patrick Patterson core with whatever you get back for DeMar DeRozan, which I think is actually not going to be a bad return. He's still a top 35, 30 player in the NBA, regardless of his faults. And those guys have value, especially on what is he? He's going to be on a $27 million a year number that doesn't rise over the course of the next 4 years with a player option at the end. That's actually going to be a pretty good contract for a top 30 player in the NBA.
Yeah, and teams are going to value him like that. I don't necessarily value DeRozan. We've talked about this before. I don't value him as highly as maybe teams do, but I'm damn sure that teams value him pretty highly. I think they could get something nice for him. Ideally, what you'd like to do is try to move Valanciunas. I'm not sure if you can get off the DeMar Carroll contract at this point. He's just not the same player.
Do you think you can get off the Valanciunas contract for value?
That's a good point. I don't know. It depends on what you define value, of course. I don't think you're going to get anything good for him. I think that he's been kind of exposed as what people thought he's been for a while, as like a really good kind of bucket getter off the bench role at high levels of play. Like he can start during the regular season, and then in the postseason, he's not going to be able to survive there against the really good teams. So he's kind of like a high usage, low minute bucket getter off the bench. So, I mean, you might be able to get some kind of rotation piece for him, but it's definitely not going to be an impact guy. Ideally, you just like to offload that salary and maybe pursue someone in free agency. It just makes it a lot harder because all these big cap holds, like Kyle Lowry with $18 million, Serge Ibaka $18.375 million. You probably have to choose between Ibaka and Patterson. And it's just there's a lot of moving parts, and these cap holds are just enormous. Like they take Toronto over the cap as it is. So there's going to be a lot of finagling necessary.
So let's kind of talk about Serge Ibaka then. Ibaka's max starts at $30.3 million next season, give or take, whatever the salary cap falls at. His max contract is 5 years, $175. His 4-year max contract anywhere else is $130.3. I don't think he gets a max contract. What do you think about this?
That's going to come down to assessing the market. In a vacuum, I don't think he will, just because the age concerns, the play drop this year, especially in Orlando. It just depends on how teams value him. I think he can carry a lot of value if teams play him at the 5. At the 4, I'm not as certain, but I think I would lean with what you're saying is I don't think he's going to get a full max, but I would say would you say he gets over $20 million?
Yeah, I would say probably his sweet spot's going to be like 100, right? Like something like that. Like, give or take $5 million either way. He is a really good player. Like he still has a lot of value. The way that he can space the floor has inherent value. He knocked down 40% of his, or 39%, I'm sorry, of his 4 3-point attempts a game this year. That has value. He's not a great shot blocker anymore. And he's not a great rim protector anymore, which is a problem. He's somewhat mobile for a center. He's at least mobile enough for a center to, play on the perimeter and kind of do some stuff. He'll be 28 next year. By age, I don't know how old he is. I mean, maybe he's 28. I think, we'll go with 28, but that kind of plays into the back of your mind if you are the person expending like 4 years, $100 million on a guy. So I would not max him by any stretch of the imagination. I don't know that any team will, especially in this big man heavy market now where we have, seemingly every team has at least one guy now that can at least take, solid minutes at center. He's one of the better ones, but I don't know where the market materializes for him.
Yeah, it really has to be a team that can take advantage of his first 2 years, especially if, ideally a competitive team. I haven't checked cap space for these, but like Houston Rockets, San Antonio Spurs, those kind of guys, they're like on the precipice of competing, and Ibaka could help them in certain ways, maybe get on the Warriors level. Probably not going to happen. I'm just saying conceptually, that would be the kind of team I would look for, to where you can really lock in those first 2 years and get value. Maybe you see more of an athleticism decline for Ibaka in those latter 2 years, so that's going to hurt. So you have to get maximum value short term.
What would you think of him on Minnesota?
Ooh, that'd be kind of interesting.
Because you'd play him next to Karl Towns, obviously, and this is if they don't end up with a top 3 pick and end up with a guy like Jonathan Isaac or whatever. They have they have somewhere between $26 and $36 million in cap space this offseason. They're going to be able to fit in Ibaka. It's whether or not you want to play him at the 4 and play him next to Karl Towns, though, which I think is very questionable at this stage, especially given the fact that they just outlaid like $15 million a year to Gorgui Dieng.
Yeah, you want to play both those guys defending 5s. That was the problem with Towns this year, is Tibbs had him chasing around the perimeter a lot at the 4, and that's just not what he's best suited for, and neither is Ibaka. So I think there's similar problems there. I just don't like. I like to align my core more with the core players, like age-wise. Like Ibaka, signing him, Minnesota's not going to be ready to compete for 3-4 years maybe, as far as if you think that Wiggins is going to get to a certain level, Levine's going to improve, Towns is going to be Towns. So I get what you're saying. I don't think he's an ideal fit, just because I think that Tibbs will continue he'll probably just play Ibaka in Gorgui Dieng's current role and keep Karl Towns on the perimeter on defense, and I just don't think he's going to improve that way. But I can see the merits of possibly exploring that. Yeah,
and I mean, maybe Boston works as well if Boston misses out on Paul Millsap and Gordon Hayward. I mean, he wouldn't help their rebounding issues, though, which makes me kind of think, would they really want to spend 4 years, $100 million on a guy like that, because they can get the max cap space to even max him out if they want. But more than that, they can get the cap space to at least give him $25 million a year.
Yeah, and that makes me like, if they were going to do that, maybe just pursue Nerlens well at the trade deadline last year. I don't know if it was more of like the extracurriculars with him and the off the court stuff that they weren't interested in. But if you're going to get like a rim protector, like I would have gone with Noel, better athlete, of course, defending in space, and you would still have those same rebounding concerns. So maybe that's the deterrent that would be the same in this case.
So let's kind of explore the other option that you said, because we've kind of talked now about the fact that if I was Toronto, I probably would re-sign Lowry if I can. I would try and get him at a number lower than $35 million, because there's a big world of difference between $150 million on a 4-year deal and, $170 million on a 5-year deal, especially whenever you are going to be 36, 37 coming off of this 5-year contract. So yeah. I think that there's probably some wiggle room there in terms of, does he get fully maxed out? Does he end up at something like $170 or so million? Let's explore the other side of that, though. If they blow it up, where do they go from there? What do you've kind of said that you believe they should, trade DeRozan, trade Valanciunas. Let's say that they decide trading DeMar DeRozan isn't really an option at that stage because they need to keep people coming to the arena. And DeMar DeRozan, trading him 1 year after giving him a 5-year, $139 million salary contract extension contract, I guess restricted free agent contract, really. That wouldn't be the best look either, I don't think. So what do you do to kind of retool around DeMar DeRozan, assuming that he is your piece going forward?
I mean, then you have to look to free agency if you're trying to align talent. The problem is who's going to come to Toronto and play with DeMar DeRozan as far as if you lose Kyle Lowry. The core becomes much less so competitive. So I don't know if they really have a mechanism to get a Paul Millsap, for example. Would Paul Millsap leave Atlanta to go play in Toronto with DeMar DeRozan, Jonas Valanciunas, and not a lot of other areas to improve? You know what I mean? There's not a very alluring case if they don't bring back Kyle Lowry. So for me, I would definitely try to move DeMar DeRozan in that case. It just doesn't really make any sense to do it any other way, at least for me, because you could probably there's going to be a team that would probably give you a top maybe 5 protected first rounder along with other rotation pieces, young pieces and stuff like that. You could get a pretty nice return for him. So that wasn't really the question addressed. I just don't know what you do if you kept DeRozan. There's just not a lot of avenues you could really go.
Well, I guess that my question is, with DeRozan and without Lowry, without Ibaka, say they can move Jonas Valanciunas for something, is that roster really good enough to, even be an 8 seed or a 9 seed? I feel like that roster is still probably probably a bottom 7 team in the league, right?
It probably will be, yeah. I mean, it depends on who exactly you move. But, yeah, I mean, you have Norman Powell, who is my favorite young guy on that team. Who knows how good Jakob Poeltl is. You have some young guys with some talent. DeLon Wright's more of a secondary handler type. But
the thing is, a lot of those guys that you're talking about right now, they don't really have a lot of upside. You know what I mean? Jakob Poeltl is going to be similar to Jonas Valanciunas in that you probably can't play him all the time, and he's probably going to be best suited to a bench role on a playoff team. You have Fred VanVleet, who I like a decent amount. You have Norman Powell, who obviously I've been riding and driving the train for years. You have Corey Joseph as your point guard then. You have Damari Carroll, who's not really useful anymore on a basketball floor. DeLon Wright, like you said, who's going to be 25 or 26 next year. Pascal Siakam is already, I think, 22, 23 years old as a rookie. These guys that they drafted role players instead of upside players, really, to kind of build around this core. So I feel like those guys aren't going to take a necessary next step,
Agreed. I think they're much more better situated to play specific roles in the league around better players and around actual core franchise. Well, I shouldn't say franchise. That's over analyzing a bit, but just core players. These guys are supplementary pieces for sure. And the thing is, DeRozan, what is that really doing for you outside of reputation, keeping him an extra year? Is there any other incentives than that, really?
Well, I think it keeps fans because I think that he's he's beloved in Toronto. Like it is what it is. And you can, address the merits of that. You can think it's a really bad idea. And ultimately, from a team building perspective, I think it is a really bad idea. But at the same time, like I can see the, owners of Toronto, MLSE, just deciding, hey, we need to just keep this guy, around our team so that our team does not win 6 games next year.
Yeah, and that might be the reality of the situation, is that that's how some of the league teams and some of the franchises operate with that kind of mindset. I'm just it's hard to really empathize with that when you see like the Sixers and you're brainwashed by that kind of culture. It's like, okay, it's all about competing for a title. I'm going to make every single move to eventually get there. And I think keeping DeMar DeRozan would definitely keep some guys in the seats, but it's not really doing your franchise any good from a long-term view.
Yeah. Is there any big name that you think they could even like make a move for? Say that you trade, you decide to keep Kyle Lowry, I guess that they'll keep Serge Ibaka in that case too. I mean, he and Masai Ujiri have a long-term relationship from the Giants in Africa program. I would think that that's probably going to play a role if they decide to keep the gang together, so to speak. Who do you think they could even go after to improve? Because in that case, you are still theoretically chasing a title. And I just don't know what moves they make. Like they almost certainly trade Norman Powell in this scenario, and that just makes me sad for their fans.
Yeah, I mean, you have to do it via trade by that because you're obviously going to be over the cap depending on some other ancillary moves, but pretty much you're certain to be over the cap, at least as far as it goes. You're not going to sign a star player. That's the thing about their roster construction is they don't have, like you said, they have supplementary talent. They have nice kind of role player pieces, but they have nobody that really moves the needle in these large-scale trade discussions. Like nobody's like, oh, I have to have Norman Powell, even though I really like him. He's not going to move the needle for a lot of teams. He's just a useful piece, right?
Right.
So I don't know. They don't have the assets to get a star-level player. That's more of Boston, Denver Nuggets. Those guys, if there's going to be a star that's dealt in the next couple of years, those are the teams that are going to have the pieces to make a move there. Toronto has never really been that to me.
Yeah. They have basically the toughest set of choices in the NBA coming up this offseason. Like, even the Clippers basically just have, okay, is Chris Paul coming back? Yes. All right, we're getting the gang back together. Is Chris Paul coming back? No. All right, everyone's leaving except maybe Blake. Doc's probably going somewhere else, and we're starting over with DeAndre Jordan and maybe Blake. So, even they don't have these difficult choices coming up. The Raptors, though, have 97 different variables that doesn't even consider should Dwane Casey be back after leading essentially 3 years of 50-win rosters. What do you think about Dwane Casey? I don't even know what to make of him right now.
I'm in the same boat. I don't know what you do there. He's done enough to where it's kind of hard to make a move, and you always use the justification of they're playing against the Cavs. What is he supposed to do? But I mean, it takes him at least one game of every series to figure out rotations and figure out all that stuff. And by then it might even be too late. You don't have a very large margin for error against elite teams. You can't just take one game and be like, oh, okay, this is how I'm going to adjust. That just doesn't work that way in the NBA. So I think it's an interesting conundrum they're in there. I wouldn't be surprised either way they go. I don't think getting another coach in there is going to make a huge difference. Like we talked about, just the talent disparity is going to ultimately govern.
Yeah, Dwane Casey has won an average of 51 games over the course of the last 4 years. That would be a very harsh firing. Sometimes I understand, though, making a choice and just making a change, just to make a change and see if it affects the roster in a different way. Maybe it would positively affect it. Maybe it would negatively affect it. We'll see going forward. This roster is in a tough spot. I just wish that they could. I wish that they would have done maybe not even a better job of filling around Lowry and DeRozan. I feel like they've done as much as they can. And Ujiri has done as much as he can. It's just it's a really tough situation. I don't know what to do.
The Carroll thing really went wrong, and I thought that was a good move at the time. It was a calculated move. He filled a role on their team that they really needed. It's just the injuries, and he just kind of dropped off a cliff, and that's really unfortunate. And that stuff happens in the NBA. But for me, it's just it's an interesting conundrum they're in with Lowry, because I feel like if they offered him that 5th year, is he really going to turn down an extra $53 million guaranteed? That's the same thing as Chris Paul. If both those teams offer it, I know the Clippers are going to. With Toronto, it's more interesting because we're not really sure if the Raptors are going to with Lowry for sure, at least that full maximum amount. I think if they did that, I think he would stay. Even though there's reports on he wants to go to the West and all that stuff, it's like, what's better in the West? I mean, you have to go past the Warriors there too if you want to win. So I think a lot of players in that situation, especially given the age, that $53 million guarantee is just huge.
Yeah, I mean, what is the West? The West, like, his best option is probably going to San Antonio, right? And San Antonio, to get him at $30 million a year even, like, say he was willing to take a cut from the $35 million that he could potentially get, they would have to do pretty significant, like, little roster finagles to get $30 million of cap space. So I don't know. I don't know where the ideal fit for him beyond Toronto would be, in terms of contending at least. Does New Orleans is probably better off signing Drew Holiday to the lesser max than signing Kyle Lowry, and Minnesota. Maybe Minnesota could sign him, and kind of try and build around Lowry, Wiggins. Towns obviously, and see what happens there. Maybe get a Taj Gibson to come in, and Taj, I don't even know how they would fit in Taj at that stage, because he's probably going to be in for like $16 million this offseason per year. So like, I just don't know where I see the fit for Lowry outside of Toronto, unless he wants to go home to Philadelphia too. Like that would work as well. And he would be a really nice fit next to a guy like Ben Simmons and next to Joel Embiid, and he could make $152 million. Like, if he wants to contend next year, though, Toronto still probably makes the most sense.
Yeah, and it's always early to predict cap space because teams can maneuver and stuff like that. I'm pretty fluid with that stuff. Like, if Houston wants to create cap space, if San Antonio wants to create cap space, I think all those teams can probably do that. The question is, what's the cost? You have a bunch of teams like the Nets who are like predators for assets. So you're going to be able to unload guys if you want to. The question is, what's the opportunity cost? And for Lowry, is going to San Antonio, that'd be a great fit, by the way. That'd be fantastic if he went to San Antonio. Yeah. And even like Houston, I know that's kind of a weird fit with Harden because he's so ball dominant, but they need a secondary creator. They need somebody else who can do something, because Harden his load is just so ridiculous. Him and Westbrook just carry way too much volume. They carry way too much usage. In the playoffs, you need a second guy. And they could probably maneuver around a little bit to create space, but that's just that long shot option.
Yeah, I mean, San Antonio is the easier one, right? Like, San Antonio, you could find a way to like kind of make it work. I think they have a possible like $26 million. They get rid of all their cap holds and stuff this offseason. That's a lot more doable than I think Houston. Houston doesn't really have much in the way of like upcoming free agents. I don't think, do they?
I don't think so. They locked in pretty hard with Eric Gordon, Ryan Anderson, and that kind of core. They're probably going to have to lock up Capella eventually. So, yeah, they have less flexibility than the Spurs do for sure. Just the Spurs, that Pau Gasol contract, man, I just don't know why they gave him that second-year player option. It was befuddling me at the time, and it still befuddles me.
Yeah, like, I think they could probably get rid of it to Brooklyn if they needed to. Like, yeah, exactly. If they really wanted to, like, say, hey, Brooklyn, we'll toss you an extra first-round pick, take Pau Gasol for a year. I think Brooklyn 100%. Probably does that. But, like, it was just a silly contract at the time. I don't understand why you would give him a second year.
Yeah, it wasn't, like, the first-year amount that had me bothered. It was the second year. Like, I get if it's one free agency period and you're like, oh, how else when you need this money? Might as well sign Pau Gasol. But don't lock up any, future flexibility to Pau Gasol, a guy that can't get on the floor against the elite teams in the league. It just didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. All right, do you have anything else to say about Toronto? Like, they're in a shitty spot, I feel like is the best way to put it.
Yeah, it's just caught between a rock and a hard place. I mean, what do you do? But I feel like this is a lot of the league that doesn't have those emerging talents. Like, if you're not the Sixers, who probably have, like, two franchise cornerstone pieces, potentially. We don't really know with Simmons, and Embiid looks like he is with healthy. If you're not that kind of team that has those fixtures in place, like, what really are you? You're kind of in limbo for the next 3 or 4 years, and that's, like, the broader narrative of, like, the future of the NBA right now.
Yeah, it just, like... It's not a shitty place to be, but it feels like a shitty place to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about NBA draft prospects. Like I said at the top, we're going to go with like deeper sleepers here. And the way that we can do this is, Cole, do you have like kind of a list of guys?
I do. I have a list of 5 or 6. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the way that you and I can do this then is you can shout out a name first. We'll talk about them. And then I'll shout out a name and we'll talk about them. And then we'll go back and forth. Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Cool. So who is the first name on your list? I have a feeling I know who it is.
Yeah, I really like Sterling Brown. This is a guy that I've seen a lot of tape on. I was not at Portsmouth this year, so I didn't see him, and obviously he didn't get an invite to the Combine, which is kind of worrisome. I don't know how he played there, but overall, He's a guy with a great frame, good size, 6'6", really good shooting profile. He can shoot off the catch, off screens, off the dribble. And I just like his mechanics. They're really simple, and he just looks really good on film. He's got a good feel level. I'm not sure if he has the burst or the athleticism to run like consistent secondary pick and rolls or anything like that in the league, even on the bench. But at least he can dribble. He has good feel as far as pick and roll. He can pass on the move, and he has the frame to switch some. He's not a great athlete, and I think that's the huge minus. Is like you look at him, he doesn't have great burst. He's not a great vertical athlete. Obviously, nothing like his brother Shannon, but he brings a lot of skill sets to the wing spot at that juncture. Where if we're talking about undrafted guys that could make a roster, I think he does enough well to maybe get looks there.
Yeah, I mean, not only that, but he shares a famous name with an actor, right? So that's cool.
That too.
So Sterling Brown, okay, this is a guy that's been like kind of hot, like even in like NBA circles, like you talk to scouts and stuff. They're interested for sure. My thing with him is I've never really thought that he had a whole lot of game. You know what I mean? And I don't mean that in terms of like, being able to shoot the basketball, which he's obviously really capable of doing. Over the course of his career, 300 3-point attempts at SMU, something like 45% from three. The guy can shoot the ever-loving shit out of the ball. But the thing is, off the dribble, I actually don't really think he has a whole lot of game. Like, I don't think he's going to be all that effective attacking closeouts. I think that you can just play him tight and that'll create space, but you have to have a secondary option off the dribble in the NBA. And I don't really see that for him. And like you said, he's not really a great athlete. He's a guy that certainly I have like in my top 80. Like he's an interesting player, like top 80, top 90 or so. I'm just not as excited as like guys like for instance, like I know Mike Schmitz really likes him as well. And I talked to, John Gavoni. John Gavoni has him at like 67 or so on his big board. So like, I get it. I get the appeal of Sterling Brown, and I'm going to talk about guys as well, like who are elite shooters and, guys that have their own deficiencies in terms of handling the ball. But I don't know that I see enough upside defensively due to the athleticism for Sterling Brown.
I think that's fair. I mean, all that's fair. That's why he's not going to be drafted probably. But yeah, I think he can do enough. Like maybe attacking closeouts, he's not going to get all the way to the rim and finish. He's not really an adept finisher, even though he can kind of go through contact with his body. He doesn't get good enough vertical explosion for that. But I do think he can attack closeouts and make a pass. I think he's capable of doing that. Maybe one or two dribbles, make a pass. I think he can do that pretty consistently. I like his feel level. So, yeah, I think he can do a little bit there, but, yeah, there's not a lot of upside.
Yeah. Okay, so my first guy, I have Derek White here. Do we think there's a chance he goes undrafted, though?
I didn't include him because I think he will be drafted. He's getting some good hype. I know Schmitz mentioned him at Portsmouth, and he's getting some general buzz on draft Twitter, in air quotes. So I think that he's getting enough pub to where I think he probably goes second round from what I've seen of him.
Yeah, like I have Derek White as like a borderline top 40 player in this draft. So like I'm super high on him, and I don't know that, we really can fit him into this, but reasons I like him: incredible shooter off the dribble, really, really good shooter in general. Athletic vertically, not necessarily the most, laterally adept athlete, has some lead ball handler skills, can really pass the ball, has some ball handling ability, has a really cool, interesting story where he's come up from Division II, kind of dominated the Pac-12 this year. So there's growth in his game. He's on a solid upward trajectory in terms of development. Assuming though that he's out of this mix, because I think that, he's not a guaranteed NBA player by any stretch of the imagination. He's not a good defender right now, for instance, and I think that that's going to be a problem for him. But let's throw him out because I think he's getting enough buzz. What do you think of Dwane Reed?
I haven't seen a ton of him, to be honest. I obviously watched a lot of Bruce Brown, and that's where I was fixating my attention on as far as his projection. Reed, I mean, he can shoot a little bit. He's a pretty good athlete. I don't really have anything specific outside of that. That's like as far as positional play type stats and all that stuff. So I'm going to defer to you on this one.
Yeah. So Dwane Reed, 40% 3-point shooter over the course of 500 jump shots throughout his collegiate career at Miami. 6'4", 6'5", with a 7-foot wingspan. Really good defensive player for sure. Like he is going to be able to sit down. He's going to be able to guard a couple of ones, maybe like the slower ones, like Patrick Beverley's and everything, but his sweet spot's going to be more in the 2-3 range. Has some ball skill. I think what separates him from Sterling Brown for me is that he has some ability to create off the dribble. He can actually, not just reverse the ball whenever the ball comes to him and make a quick decision. He can actually attack a closeout and kind of create for someone else if the defense closes out on him or he gets a help side from the wing. So I like what he can bring in terms of his, kind of two-way ability. And of course, I think a lot of the guys that we're both going to mention are going to be wings, right?
Yes, for the most part. I got a couple fours in here, but yeah.
Yeah, so like wings in general are going to be much more capable of surprising people, I think. Like guys like Wayne Selden, who are athletic, who are able to shoot the three ball, because you look around the NBA right now and there just aren't enough wings.
Yeah, it's the most highly coveted position. That's the most demand there, especially if you can get any kind of two-way wings. And when you look at the best draft picks in the second round over the past 5-6 years, you got your Jay Crowders, your Chris Middletons, a lot of those wing types. Those are the ones that hit gold. I think that's probably the best area to invest in.
Yep, absolutely. Who is your next guy?
Marcus McDuffie. I'm not sure if he satisfies this because I think if he doesn't get good reports as far as this goes, he'll probably just go back to school. So I'm not sure if he's
100% in on this, by the way.
Okay, so he's really intriguing to me from a physical profile, athletic standpoint, but I do think the skills are a little bit underrated. 33.7% from three on 166 attempts in his first 2 years, 78.3% from the line. I think he can defend pretty well. He's got a good body. He's a good athlete, and he can actually pass a little bit too. So I think a lot of when we're talking about these guys, you're mostly, do you buy the jump shot or do you not buy the jump shot, right? And this late, for the most part, we're looking for shooters, and preferably guys that have a baseline athletic threshold who can maybe play defense, and I think he pretty much satisfies all that criteria.
Has he decided to return? I don't remember or not.
He's still up in the air, so he hasn't signed an agent yet, but he's still he's still right now in the draft technically, I guess. But
yeah, I really do like him. I think he's probably going to return to Wichita State. Didn't get a combine invite. I don't think he's on the alternate list from what I know. He's the kind of guy where Wichita State's probably going to be a top 10 team coming into college basketball next season. He will be either the best or second best, depending on what you think of Landry Shamet, who I think, again, another kind of underrated NBA prospect long-term. Depending on what you think of Landry Shamet, he's either going to be the best or second best player on a top 10 team next year. I think it makes a lot of sense for him to return and kind of build that value because, like you said, I'm a big fan of his as well. I really like the skill set. I really like the fact 6'8", can shoot the ball a little bit, needs to work on his handle a little bit. I think if he can consistently attack closeouts, he's definitely going to be an NBA player, but guys under Greg Marshall, they really learn how to defend, and he's going to be very switchable in the NBA for sure.
Yeah, he has a projectable role in the NBA, and he has that kind of athleticism to where you think he could become something. We talk about these two-way contracts and stuff like that. This would be kind of an ideal guy for that for me, and just get experience in the D League, and you have a very projectable skill set, kind of like the Derrick Jones Jr. kid from the Suns this year. I know he's not the athlete that Derrick Jones is, but kind of conceptually that same idea.
Yep. No, 100% agree. All right. My next guy is going to be LJ Peak. Do we think LJ Peak fits this criteria?
Yeah, from what I've seen, I can get the allure of him. He's another guy. I did not watch a lot of their team this year, so I don't have a great read, but conceptually he fits this criteria from what I've seen.
Yeah, 6'5", 6'10" wingspan. Really does get after it defensively. Not going to be hyper switchable, probably a 1-3 guy more than a switchable all throughout the lineup guy. Again, he comes down to whether or not you believe in the jump shot. Over the course of his last 2 years in college, something like 200 3-pointers, 36.6% from three, but only hit it at around 32% this season. If you buy into free throw shooting as a proxy for potential to shoot it in the future, I personally don't. He's hit 76 and 80% over the course of the last 2 years from the free throw line. Can pass a lot. He actually has a lot of game in terms of being able to dime out guys. Averaged almost 4 assists a game this year. I'm a fan of what he brings. I was surprised that he did not get a combine invite.
Yeah, I can see that. From what I've seen, there's some intrigue there. I got to go back and watch more film of him when I get to that point. But from what you've said, I'm definitely a little bit interested now.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Next guy.
This is kind of a shot in the dark. I've seen enough of him. He was at Hoop Summit last year, and he did enough to impress me. I like perimeter fours with kind of those perimeter ball skills. Justin Jackson of Maryland. Mm-hmm. So we talk about build 6'8", 7'3", wingspan. I think he can put the ball pretty well on the floor. He's pretty fast, actually. He's not super fast, but he's athletic enough to put the ball on the floor a couple times, attacking closeouts, gets to the basket, gets really good length extension around the rim. Really quick release on his shot, minimal elevation, 43.8% from three this year on 105 attempts. He impressed me at the Hoop Summit with his grab-and-go ability a little bit. I don't remember very in-depth details about his defense, and that's something that I need to go back and watch for. But just conceptually, from an offensive standpoint, he does enough to where if he's going to go undrafted, I would definitely take a shot on him.
Yeah, that's an interesting guy for sure. Like you said, kind of a lot to like in terms of frame and body, in terms of skill set, the fact that he can handle the ball whenever he has, I believe, something like an 8'11", 8'10" standing reach. You know, it's pretty impressive for him that he can do all of that. Do I think that if he was someone that could get a guaranteed two-way contract, I would probably go if I was him, even though he's going to have a bigger role at Maryland this year. The reason I say that is I think that his stock is in a bit of a risky place, right? Where if he doesn't necessarily take that next leap forward next season, he's going to be considered to have stagnated in terms of his game, and that's going to kind of hurt his stock going forward. He's a guy that's always going to have intrigue due to the frame, due to the fact that he's so long, and in today's NBA, he could be such a switchable defender, potentially even if you can develop him. If I was him, though, and I could get that guaranteed two-way, I might go.
I agree, because you had Melo Trimble, dominating the ball up this year, so maybe his creation ability was not picked on like it would be next year. Maybe he gets more self-creation opportunities. He falls down there. We've seen that from a couple guys like Nigel Hayes. So maybe he tries to capitalize on this. I agree. If he gets that guaranteed two-way contract or something in that realm, I think I would take a shot just because he has the tools and he has enough intrigue now to where I think somebody will bite.
Yeah. What do we think? I'm going to start going a little bit deeper here now. What do we think of Tyler Dorsey?
Oh, goodness. I know some people really like him. He's a guy that I typically tend to fade, like those shooters.
Yep.
I think he can definitely shoot. I don't really buy the defense. He has some interesting frame. No. Yeah. So, like, that guy, are his ball skills good enough? That's my question for you. Can he do enough off the dribble where he has any kind of intrigue for you?
I think that he's... So I guess my thing is I think he's just going to get buckets in the NBA. Like, okay. I think he is a born bucket getter in whatever league he plays in. He's such a good shooter off the dribble. He's not a one is the problem. He's 6'4", 6'3", not a one, very small arms, not a great athlete, but he has great change of pace. He has great change of direction. He kind of just innately understands how to gain space for his jump shot, and I think that's going to help him. And again, shooter. The guy can knock down shots. He's 40% from three over each of his 2 seasons at Oregon, almost 400 attempts in that time frame. I think that he's just kind of going to, I'm not saying that he's going to be a good player on a title team or anything like that, but if you told me he turned into Patty Mills, I totally buy that.
That's really interesting. I like that kind of build for Summer League, especially because we've seen the Forbes kid from Michigan State, make the Spurs Summer League team and stuff like that because he could really shoot the hell out of the ball. Yeah. And they get a better chance just because they have that NBA skill. So maybe if he goes into Summer League on a team and really shoots out of the ball, especially off the dribble, if he can show any kind of off the dribble shooting at the next level, I think that there could be some intrigue there. It's just not somebody he wouldn't be on my radar if I'm making a draft list, but I don't usually go that deep. I go 30 deep or something. He wouldn't be anywhere near the realm of that just as far as how his archetype is and stuff like that. But yeah, I get where you're going with this.
Yeah, and let's be clear too. He's going to be a millionaire playing basketball either here or in Greece. He's someone who has Greek citizenship, has played for the Greek national team. This dude's going to make bank playing basketball for years. I think and by draft sleepers, I mean that I think I'm a little bit higher on him than most people are. You know what I mean?
It's all relative.
Yeah, it's all relative, really. All right, who's your next guy?
And kind of similar lines as the last guy talked about, Justin Jackson, Kyle Kuzma of Utah.
He's on my list.
Yeah, so really fluid with good size and length. I was really impressed with his fluidity as an athlete. He's not very explosive, but he can move around. He looks really good moving around and around the rim, kind of. He can't explode, but just as far as conceptually, length, fluidity. Shot looks more natural, I think the numbers are. Another guy with kind of the minimum mechanics when he shoots that I like. He can handle a bit and pass some, so there's some skill level, but basically you're looking at, a guy that has great positional size, good length, decently skilled with at least some level of feel. The issue is defense. I don't know if he's going to play any defense. He at least has the size and the length to do some stuff there. Don't know how quick he is laterally, but Yeah, he's just a guy that fits a couple, like the tools elements, the feel, and or I should say some feel, and then some skill level.
Yeah, he's 100% in the draft as well, so that's worth pointing out. Signed with, I believe, priority. So he's going to be in the draft. I agree with you. I think that a team takes a shot on him as a two-way guy or something along those lines. Tries to develop him. If he can become a good defender, then he's a valuable player. If he can't become a good defender, then it's just not really worth continuing to deal with the, length of time it's going to take. Again, I do kind of like him as like a combo 4-5 in Europe as well, though.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I think he's skilled enough to carry that.
Mm-hmm. All right, I am going to go back down to LSU with this one.
Oh, wow.
Antonio Blakeney, I think, is an interesting prospect who a lot of people have kind of just like thrown away because, he was involved in the Louisville scandal and, he was problematic playing next to Ben Simmons and everything. This guy is 6'4", 6'5" with, 6'8" wingspan. Averaged 17 points a game this year, 18 PER, 55% true shooting percentage. Can pass it a little bit more than I think he gets credit for if he's willing to. That's the key here. 21 points per 40 minutes, which is actually a really solid number for a guy like him. Just a very skilled player. I think he can shoot the ball a little bit more than he gets credit for. I think he can obviously drive and slash and score in today's NBA. The key's going to be defense. He really needs to sit down and become a really good defensive basketball player. If he does that, I think he's an NBA player. If he doesn't want to defend, I think he's going to be in Europe.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. This is a guy that I kind of wrote off after last year, and I have not watched a lot of him, so your opinion obviously is going to supersede mine here. I just didn't see anything last year. I think a lot of that was definitely hype and a letdown of the hype. So if you viewed him through a more neutral context, I could probably get the intrigue because there's enough there to maybe bite, as an undrafted free agent or something like that. But yeah, last year especially, I just was not sold on this guy at all.
Yeah, no, and I don't blame you for that, but he's improved a little bit, and I think that it's all going to be buying into role, right? Like if he's willing to buy into being a three-point shooter and attack off the dribble guy, he's going to be a fine player, but if he's not, then that's going to be problematic. All right, do you have one more guy probably? Does that sound right?
I have a couple that I don't know how high we're going to go, so there's a couple guys.
More, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to give you three guys, and you can say if they're too high or not. PJ Dozier, Andrew Jones, and Frank Mason. We talked about Mason last time.
Yeah, you're way higher on Andrew Jones than I am. So, yeah, this will be fun.
Oh, good. Okay, so I'll talk about Andrew Jones. I think he's really quick twitch. There's a lot of things that he can't do on the court.
Play point guard.
Play point guard. That's definitely one of them. I think he's definitely a secondary handler type. But when I look at quickness at the point of attack, as far as how he slides, I think he's tremendously quick. Roll is the more concerning thing with him because he is a little undersized for the wing, of course, and he's not a point guard. So he's just a really good athlete. But if you're talking about maybe like somebody who comes off the bench and can be a non-defensive liability, what I don't know about him too much is his shake level. I know he's really quick in the open court. He's got a good first step, and he can explode to the rim. I'm going to be completely honest here. I think that he should go back to school. I would say it about him more than basically anybody else on this list that we've talked about. He really needs more experience. But when you watch videos of him, I've seen Shaka Smart talk about him. He's pretty high on him as far as intellectually. So I think there's enough there with the athleticism, which I think is fantastic, especially quickness-wise. There's enough there to roll the dice on in the second round. I had him much higher before, and then I kind of went back and watched, and I was like, I think he's too far away right now. But as far as a developmental prospect, I really like him.
So these guys tend to be my least favorite types of prospects, right? The Edmund Sumners, the Andrew Joneses, the Kobe Simmonses, the guys that are hyper elite athletes at point guard that aren't point guards. The Michael Carter Williams effect, right? That's kind of what these guys remind me of. Andrew Jones to me is a 6'4" guard who can't play point guard, who doesn't shoot it well. And I don't know what to do with that guy.
That's absolutely, I think that's the right way to look at it. I'm a little higher on his shooting. I think he can do it. I think he can shoot okay off the catch. I didn't like his shot selection at Texas. That was a big part. He took some bad shots off the dribble that I thought were avoidable and probably hindered his percentages. I'm not saying he's great shooting, obviously. I just think he's not terrible there, and he's a good athlete to where you can buy into. The issue is the role, like you discussed. You don't like these kind of guys, and I get that completely because they're harder to plug into a secondary kind of handler type. If you're not going to shoot it well, if you're not going to defend at an elite level, which he probably could defend point guards really well. And I think that's the biggest allure for me, is the fact that I think he can stay in front of the quicker guys in the NBA. It's just how you value that, I guess.
Yeah, and let's be clear. Like, I'm not writing him off for the NBA, but right now I think it's going to be really, really tough for him. Who were your other two? You had Dozier. Dozier's an interesting one because he has injury concerns, and has since high school. He's a really good defender. Has a lot of ball skill. Kind of is going to be able to float between the 1 and the 3, I think, depending on what players you put next to him. Yeah, I think that I would take a shot on him as a two-way contract guy for sure. Who was your third?
Frank Mason was my other guy. We've already talked about him before.
I have Frank Mason on this list. I love Frank Mason.
Well, his ability to shoot off the dribble, he has decent burst. I mean, it's not great, but he has the frame at least to maybe absorb a little bit of contact to the rim. He's not going to be like a high-level finisher, of course. He suffers from the same fate as other water bug types, but when we combine that off the catch shooting with the off the dribble shooting, I could see him as a fifth guard who can come into the league and get offense like a Yogi Ferrell type. Yeah,
no, that's not too bad. All right. I had Frank Mason on my list. I think that he should be drafted like near the end of the first round.
Oh, wow. There you go.
Yeah, like I'm super high on Frank Mason. Here are going to be my last three. I'm going to go to the senior class because we've talked a lot about some underclassmen that can have some upside. So Derek Walton is a really interesting guy to me because he really, really took a massive step forward as a player at Michigan over the course of the last month or 2 months, 3 months of the season. 92nd percentile catch and shoot guy, 92nd percentile off the dribble guy. Has always been a very active rebounder who can defend a little bit. Not a great defender, but he at least gets up in your grill at the point of attack. My biggest thing right now for point guards is I want guys who can shoot both off the catch and off the dribble. I think it's a lot easier to find roles for those guys if they just have that general competence level. The big thing for Walton, though, that kind of separated him this season, he became much more efficient inside the arc than he was in the past. He became much better at finishing around the rim. And that says a lot because I believe that he is still like someone who only took like 40 shots around the rim this year and didn't really finish all that well. But what he did was he kind of figured out a way to start knocking down like little mid-range jumpers on closeouts. And I think that that's going to help him.
Yeah, for me, he's the guy that I looked at and was like, this is the European guy. This is the guy that's going to go over there. He's going to shoot the hell out of the ball off the dribble and off the catch.
Yep.
It can really fit into that scheme. Athletically, you have questions. Quickness-wise, you have questions. Defensively, I don't think he's going to be able to guard anyone. He's got decent size, but I don't know. Like maybe he applies pressure, but I just haven't seen him be able to slide consistently from what I've seen of Michigan, which is probably like 3 or 4 games. He just hasn't been able to stay in front of guys consistently enough for my liking there.
He's 6 foot. It's hard.
Yeah, at a position where like defense matters less, but it still matters. You know what I mean? Like if you're a good enough offensive player, you can offset that, of course. But that's the allure for him, I would think. He's good enough on offense.
Yeah, I mean, I believe he was the best player in the country this year in spot-up situations, according to Synergy.
Wow.
Yeah, like I think he's going to be able to play off-ball, going to be able to play on-ball. And those guys like that have that versatility, I think, really have an advantage in today's NBA. He will be at the Combine, so I guess the NBA is, a little bit higher on him than maybe the public is. And I'm still like not super high on him. Like I have him around like 80 on my board,
Yep.
Charles Cook is another guy from Dayton. Really interesting 4th, 5th year player. I believe he's a 5th year player now that I think about it. 40 plus from 3 each of the last 2 years at Dayton. All A-10 defensive team each of the last 2 years. Generally, what do you think of Charles Cook? I believe he's 6'5" with like a 7-foot wingspan as well.
Generally, I have not watched like probably a single minute of him. So this is all on you here.
All right, we're just going to go with that. Doesn't have a ton of ball skill, athlete, defense, shooting. There you go. The last guy, I don't know that you've watched at all, but you've watched actually a little bit of Terrence Davis from Mississippi, haven't you?
I think I've seen a little bit. I don't have enough to say anything with conviction, but I've seen spurts of him.
So Terrence Davis is my like big time sleeper for like next season's NBA draft. I really like him. I'm going to point out this guy. It's his teammate, Sebastian Sais. He is a like 6'10" big man with a 7'5", 7'6" wingspan who can shoot a little bit. He hit like 29% from 3 this year. but the shot looks pretty good coming out of his hands. The release is pretty solid. The key is going to be, what position does he defend in the NBA? Can he actually become anything resembling a solid rim protector? He's probably going to fit more as an awesome 5 in Europe because he's from Spain, and he's probably going to be able to get like a 6-figure contract immediately over there. I'm interested relatively, though, in him as like a draft and stash guy that you can put over in Europe for a couple of years and see how he develops.
I'm interested to see some game tape of him now.
Yeah, he's not like great. Like, he's a guy that I have like at 100 on my board maybe, but like I'm just interested a little bit. And again, Terrence Davis, if you're interested in, seeing a guy that could kind of burst onto the scene next year, averaged like 15 and 5 a game this year for Mississippi. Really, really good player. If he averaged 20 next year, I wouldn't be surprised. I'm trying to think, is there anyone else that, actually there is one guy I do want to point out here. Javon Carter at West Virginia has, I think, if it's not the best, he is like one of the better like statistical indicators in terms of defense that I've seen in a long time from a point guard. And plus he can really shoot the basketball.
Yeah, he was on my fringe list. He would have been number 10 or so on mine. The intersection between defense and shooting for sure, like maybe a Patrick Beverley kind of down the road type. I'm not sure if he's that good of an athlete, but he's
probably
pretty good.
Like Briante Weber more than Patrick Beverley even.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm intrigued by him.
Yeah, and maybe he comes back, averages like 18 points a game, and continues to add the elite defense and kind of blows up and becomes like the Big 12 Player of the Year next year. And I think that's totally within the cards. He's not really getting a whole lot of buzz though for the NBA draft right now, so I wouldn't be surprised if he does end up returning.
So, quick question for you: what do you think happens to Raleigh Hawkins? Because he's a guy that kind of I just want to get your take on that.
I have him like as a top 60 guy right now.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a whole lot of skill to his game. He's just like a physical body right now, like 6'5", relatively long arms, pretty athletic, not like a super mobile athlete, more of like a just power athlete. He needs more skill to me. Like he needs to become a knockdown shooter, or he needs to develop more game off the dribble.
Yeah, he just looks like Lance Stevenson to me. So not as far as skill, but just physically, like when I look at him, it's like, okay, that guy reminds me of him. But I totally agree. I just was curious because I don't know what he's going to do as far as, have you heard if he's going to stay in the draft or go back?
I think it's pretty up in the air at this stage.
Is he actually playing in 5-and-5s at the combine? I don't know. He might just be measuring. I can't remember what he's doing.
I would imagine that he's going to be forced to play 5-on-5.
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, that's a good area to showcase him. So yeah,
we'll see. All right, Cole, I got to get out of here. I got to go see Guardians of the Galaxy. Do you have anything you want to plug? Anything that you want to throw out there?
I just did a week-long kind of series about off-the-dribble shooting. We talked about the importance of that for lead guards. I did it on the top 4 lead guards in this class. So
I forgot that you wrote that. I'm excited now that I kept bringing it up.
Yeah. So I wrote about Fultz, Smith, Fox, and Lonzo Ball, and kind of went into the intricacies behind why that's important. So check that out on the step back. And then this week I'm going to go into lead guard handles. So just off the dribble kind of shot creation ability to create space. So keep on the lookout for that.
All right, yeah. Go follow Cole at Cole Zwicker on Twitter. Give a shout out to your podcast too.
Oh yeah, we do What's on Draft. We usually do it every week. We're on the Almighty Ballin' Podcast Network, so check us out there. We haven't been doing it as much recently, but we are going to upgrade it around the draft time, and we basically just break down. During the season, we broke down all the big games, like the top prospects. We'll go over big boards, in air quotes again, because nobody really knows what the hell a big board is anymore. But we'll do that and just go over team fit and all that stuff. So yeah, check us out at What's on Draft. All
right. That's been Cole Zwicker. This is Sam Vicini. Please go rate, review, subscribe to the Game Theory Podcast. We're a proud member of the CLNS Radio Network. We'll be back later this week. We're going to do a full NBA Draft Combine preview at some point coming up. I'll be there in Chicago on Thursday and Friday. It's going to be a blast. So keep it locked here on the Game Theory Podcast. And until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.